Welcome to the deep dive. We are absolutely thrilled to have you joining us today.
We really are. It's a big one today.
It is a massive one. But before we get into anything else, if you're listening right now, please take a quick second, hit that like button, and subscribe to the show.
Yeah, please do. It really helps us out.
It does, and it guarantees you won't miss any of the, incredible unfiltered explorations we have coming up. Because today, you are in for an incredibly provocative, ultra-long, and just deeply incisive journey.
Definitely.
We are unpacking a huge ebook that has been making serious waves across the internet. It's titled Quiet Desperation Under Gynocracy, Men Suffering Due to Ignorance of Female Nature and Feminist Marxist Misandry.
That is quite the title.
It is. It's written by Conrad Riker, and let me tell you, it is a text that pulls absolutely no punches.
No, it truly does not. I mean, this book is a dense, comprehensive, and unapologetic manifesto. It's built to challenge literally every mainstream assumption about modern society.
Exactly. And our mission today is to completely unpack the radical perspectives that are driving the modern men's rights activist, or MRA, and red-pilled manosphere movements.
Right, the whole ideological foundation.
Yeah. We're going to look closely at the history and the mechanics of our modern institutions, specifically focusing on the author's central claim, which is that these institutions were systematically captured by a merger of feminist and Marxist ideologies.
Which is a very specific historical argument he's making.
Right. Now, if you are someone who follows the manosphere, or if you're a red-pilled man trying to understand the hidden architecture of the world around you, this deep dive is going to lay out Riker's exact arguments for you in staggering detail.
And if you want to explore the source material yourself, which we highly recommend because there's just so much intricate foundational detail in there,
So much detail.
you can check out Amazon Kindle and Google Play Books right now to buy the book. It's a fascinating read.
You should also definitely follow the author at Conrad Riker on Substack for his ongoing essays and updates.
Now, before we dive into the deep end here, it is crucial, absolutely crucial, that we establish the ground rules for today's discussion.
Yeah, we have to lay this out clearly.
We need to be explicitly clear with you, the listener. The text we are examining today is highly politically charged, polarizing, and deeply controversial.
Very much so.
As your guides on this deep dive, we are never taking sides. We are not endorsing the viewpoints, the specific claims, or the political stances presented in this content.
Not at all.
Our mission here is strictly to impartially report on the ideas contained in the original source material. We are here to serve as expert guides, helping you understand the exact arguments, the evolutionary psychology claims, and the broader, unvarnished worldview presented by the author.
We are just analyzing the architecture of these ideas. We're looking at the blueprints of this philosophy, regardless of where they fall on the political spectrum.
Perfectly said. We are the guides, the book is the territory, and we are going to walk you through exactly what Riker has built here.
Okay, let's unpack this. We need to start with the core framework of the entire book.
The foundational lens.
Exactly. The lens through which the author views the entire world. And that starts with fundamentally redefining the system we live in. I mean, we hear the word patriarchy constantly in mainstream media,
Yeah,
right?
it's everywhere.
But the author argues that's a massive misdirection. He asserts we are actually living in a gynocracy.
Yes, that is the foundational thesis upon which the rest of this sprawling manifesto is built. The author defines a gynocracy as a societal system that is fundamentally designed around female imperatives and female comfort.
So instead of men being in charge,
Right, rather than society being a patriarchy that oppresses women, the author argues that modern society is an incredibly efficient, finely tuned machine engineered specifically to extract resources, labor, and physical protection from men.
while simultaneously pathologizing their natural male instincts, according to him.
Precisely. In this view, men are not the oppressors sitting at the top of the hierarchy, they are the utilities.
The utilities, wow.
Yeah, they're the disposable engines that keep the society running. They do the dangerous jobs, fight the wars, build the infrastructure, while the legal, cultural, and social rewards flow almost entirely toward women.
And what's interesting is how he grounds this. He doesn't just present this as a recent, political development. He backs this up heavily with evolutionary psychology.
He leans very hard into biology here.
He does. He argues that this societal structure is simply biological hardwiring playing out on a macro civilizational scale. And he uses the term hypergamy constantly to explain the engine driving this gynocracy.
It's the core engine for his entire argument.
Let's look at how he illustrates this. The author points to raw data from modern dating apps, specifically Tinder. He claims that 80% of women are swiping right on and exclusively chasing the top 10 to 20% of men.
The elite men.
The elite men. He uses this Pareto distribution, this 80-20 rule, to illustrate hypergamy in raw, unfiltered action. But walk me through his logic here. How does swiping on an app translate to civilizational structure?
To understand Riker's leap from dating apps to civilization, you have to understand how he defines hypergamy. In evolutionary psychology, hypergamy is the instinctual drive to mate upwards.
To get the best deal, essentially.
Yeah, to secure the best possible genetics, status, and resources for potential offspring. The author argues that women are biologically programmed with this relentless, subconscious quality control mechanism. They are always benchmarking.
So when you look at that Tinder data,
The author's argument is that the bottom 80% of men, the vast majority of the male population, are essentially invisible to women sexually. They're viewed not as romantic equals or objects of genuine desire, but as disposable utilities.
he calls them the beta providers.
Yes, the beta providers.
So he's splitting the male experience into two entirely different realities based purely on female perception.
Precisely. The author paints a picture where female mating strategy is dualistic. A woman will ruthlessly chase the top-tier alpha male for his superior genetics, his physical dominance, and his high status.
But those alpha males are rare.
Very rare and notoriously difficult to lock down into monogamous commitment. So when she eventually wants security, safety, or steady resources, she will pivot and extract them from the average beta male.
And the tragedy, according to the book, is that she will treat the beta male's labor and provision as an entitlement while silently resenting his lack of alpha traits.
Exactly. The beta male provides the civilization-building labor, but is starved of genuine affection.
And that biological drive to constantly assess male value, to sniff out whether a man is an alpha to desire or a beta to exploit, leads us right into what the author calls the shit test industrial complex.
Which is a very provocative term.
It is. I find his framing of this fascinating because it takes incredibly mundane, everyday interactions and reframes them as psychological warfare.
He gives some very specific anecdotes for this.
He does. For example, you are on a date and the woman accidentally forgets her purse, leaving you to pay the bill. Or the classic bizarre internet question that trended a while back, would you love me if I were a worm?
Right, the worm question.
Now, most people would brush these off as simple rudeness or just a weird TikTok trend. But the author claims these aren't quirks. These are calculated evolutionary shit tests.
It is a fascinating framing because it completely removed the concept of innocent miscommunication from male-female dynamics. The author views these microinteractions as subconscious evolutionary quality control probes.
A probe to test what exactly?
A shit test is designed to test a man's dominance, his boundaries, and his psychological frame. For those familiar with manosphere terminology, maintaining frame means maintaining control of your own reality and not bending to the emotional whims or manipulations of others.
Right, but how does the purse or the worm question actually test that frame in Riker's view?
According to the text, if you pay for the forgotten purse without establishing a boundary or calling out the blatant manipulation, or if you earnestly try to answer the worm question with sweet reassurance, you have failed the test.
You've proven yourself to be compliant.
Compliant, eager to please, and weak. You have proven yourself to be a beta. The author actually compares this dynamic to the biblical story of Delilah testing Samson's strength.
Oh, that's a powerful comparison.
It is. He says Delilah didn't just want to give Samson a haircut. She was actively probing for his vulnerability. She whittled him down, testing his boundaries until he yielded his secret.
And when he yielded, he lost his power, his sight, and his freedom.
Exactly. The author argues that modern women are constantly running these Delilah-style diagnostics on men. They are probing the perimeter defenses of a man's psyche to see if he is strong enough to respect or weak enough to comfortably exploit.
And if you fail the test, her biological respect for you vanishes, even if she stays with you for your resources.
That is his core argument, yes.
So if female nature is this ruthless biological sorting mechanism, always probing for weakness, always looking to extract resources from the 80%, to subsidize their pursuit of the 20%, how did it become so systemically dominant?
Because historically, patriarchal societies had rigid social and legal structures specifically designed to balance or constrain this hypergamy.
Right. Well, the book argues that modern feminism provided the perfect vehicle to unleash it, and it did so by executing a strategic merger with Marxism.
What's fascinating here is how the author constructs this ideological history. He's not just making broad complaints, he's outlining a specific chronological and philosophical evolution.
He's building a timeline.
He argues that modern feminism essentially institutionalized female hypergamy. It took that raw biological imperative to extract resources without accountability and dressed it up in the sophisticated language of civil rights and liberation.
But feminism on its own wasn't enough to capture the entire culture.
Exactly. To achieve total societal capture, feminism needed a mechanism to dismantle the existing merit-based structures built by men. That is where Marxist critical theory comes in.
The ideological handshake. Walk me through the mechanics of that handshake, because the book leans heavily on this idea that these two philosophies are perfectly symbiotic.
The author claims that Marxism and feminism allied with a shared foundational goal, the complete dismantling of the nuclear family and the destruction of meritocracy.
Let's look at the mechanics of how that works.
Classical Marxism weaponizes class envy. It divides the world into the oppressive bourgeoisie and the oppressed proletariat, arguing that all disparities in wealth are the result of systemic theft.
And the author argues that feminism took this exact architecture and simply swapped the variables.
Yes, feminism weaponizes gender envy. It divides the world into the oppressive patriarchy and the oppressed female class, arguing that all disparities in power or representation are the result of systemic misogyny.
So by combining forces, they utilize the immense power of the state and cultural institutions to redefine traditional male virtues.
Virtues like competence, stoicism, logic, and provision. They reframe those as oppressive hierarchies that must be forcibly dismantled to achieve equal outcomes.
And this brings us to the modern workplace, which the author dramatically describes as the DEI gulag.
Diversity, equity, and inclusion.
The book goes incredibly hard on this concept, claiming that DEI quotas are not about fairness at all. They are literally meriticide, the intentional, systematic killing of merit.
He uses some very heavy-hitting corporate examples to prove that this Marxist feminist alliance is actively destroying structural integrity.
Let's look at the tech sector first. He points to Google firing engineer James Damore. Damore didn't use slurs. He cited peer-reviewed biology studies and evolutionary psychology to explain sex differences in competitiveness and career choices in the tech industry.
And he was instantly terminated.
Instantly.
The Damore incident is pivotal in the author's argument because it illustrates the total rejection of objective reality in favor of ideological compliance.
The author argues that Damore committed a heresy against the Gynocracy.
Yes, by suggesting that biological differences, not systemic oppression, accounted for the lack of 50-50 gender parity in highly stressful coding jobs. Firing him was, according to the text, a clear signal that empirical truth is no longer a defense in the corporate world if it contradicts feminist Marxist doctrine.
But he takes it further than just tech jobs. He takes it to life and death engineering. He points to the horrific Boeing 737 MAX crashes.
That's a very intense example.
It is. The book explicitly claims that the company began prioritizing diversity hiring metrics and ESG scores over hardcore, uncompromising engineering competence. The argument is that when you prioritize gender or racial quotas over the absolute best mathematical minds, planes literally fall out of the sky.
He applies the exact same logic to municipal services as well.
Right. He cites Minneapolis lowering the physical fitness standards for firefighters to ensure equal gender outcomes. He argues that dragging a 200-pound unconscious man out of a burning building doesn't care about equity. It cares about brute strength, a biological reality that men overwhelmingly possess.
The underlying analysis here is chilling when you follow his logic to its conclusion. The argument is that the system now actively punishes excellence.
Because excellence is viewed as oppressive.
From the author's perspective, society has been trained by this Marxist feminist alliance to view male competence, hyper-efficiency, and traditional excellence not as the vital assets that built civilization, but as evidence of white supremacy and patriarchal exclusion.
Therefore, to make the system fair, according to DEI standards, you cannot elevate everyone to the highest standard of competence. That's biologically impossible, according to his framework.
Instead, you must actively lower the standard to elevate mediocrity. The author argues that this is societal suicide. It is replacing the structural integrity of a suspension bridge with the fragile feelings of the engineers building it. He warns that a civilization cannot survive when it wages war on the very competence that sustains it.
It's a bleak, dystopian picture of the corporate world. But if the workplace is the DEI gulag, the family court system is described in the text as the ultimate slaughterhouse for men.
The slaughterhouse.
Let's talk about the realities of divorce presented in the book, because this is where the author argues that gynocracy exerts its most brutal, direct violence against men. The statistics he pulls are staggering.
They really are.
He cites research showing that 70 to 90% of all divorces are initiated by women. And the anecdotes he uses to bring this statistical reality to life are just gut-wrenching. There's John, the loyal nurse.
Right, John's story.
He worked grueling 60-hour night shifts, specifically to pay for his wife's education. And what happened? The court labeled him an absentee father because of the very work hours he took on to provide for the family, and gave primary custody to his ex-wife, who the book notes spent her time bartending and partying until 2 a.m.
John's story is used to highlight the double bind of male provision. The author argues that society demands men provide resources, but the family court system will immediately use the time spent acquiring those resources as evidence of poor parenting, stripping the man of his children.
Exactly. And then there's Dave, the electrician. Dave was forced by the courts to pay so much in alimony and child support that he effectively funded his ex-wife's breast implants and her new boyfriend's sports car.
While Dave himself was reduced to living in a tiny, depressing studio apartment, eating ramen.
These anecdotes are meticulously chosen to illustrate the author's characterization of family courts as feminist ATMs.
He analyzes the legal system not as a blind arbiter of justice, but as a highly calibrated engine of state-sponsored cuckoldry and outright racketeering.
Racketeering is a strong word, but he backs it up with his interpretation of the numbers.
The claims in the text are that mothers win 80 to 90% of all custody battles, even when fathers fight desperately, spending hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees for basic shared parenting.
Furthermore, the book points out that men paid 97% of all alimony.
The author argues this is the ultimate, undeniable manifestation of the gynocracy. The state using the implicit threat of police violence and imprisonment to force men into indefinite financial servitude. It is extracting their labor to subsidize the lifestyle choices of women who have unilaterally chosen to break their marriage contracts.
And it gets even darker when the book dives into the paternity fraud epidemic. This part of the book absolutely blew my mind because of the scale he is alleging.
The genetic testing data.
Yeah. The author cites genetic testing data, claiming that anywhere from 10 to 30% of men who believe they are fathers are unknowingly raising another man's biological child. That is a massive demographic of utterly cuckolded men.
It connects directly to the evolutionary theme we discussed in the first section regarding hypergamy. The author frames paternity fraud as the ultimate biological betrayal playing out in real time.
It is the exact dualistic mating strategy we talked about.
Yes, the beta male unwittingly providing his hard-earned resources to raise the offspring of the alpha male's superior genetics. But the author's real, visceral outrage is directed at the legal system's response to this biological theft.
He points out that even when a DNA test definitively proves a man is not the biological father, family courts will often still force him to pay child support under the subjective legal doctrine of the best interest of the child. Wait, really? The book claims men are forced to pay for kids that DNA proves aren't theirs? How does the author explain the legal rationale for that?
He argues that the legal rationale is entirely outcome-based, designed to protect female indiscretion at all costs. The court decides that the child needs financial support, and since the biological father is absent or unknown, the state simply forces the beta provider to continue paying, punishing him for uncovering the truth.
The author sees this as the state officially validating female deception and legally enforcing male disposability.
It proves, in his eyes, that a man's wallet is viewed by the state as community property, while his genetic legacy and his right to consent are considered completely irrelevant.
To ensure they win in these courts, to ensure they get the custody and the assets, the book claims women use the ultimate tactical weapon: false accusations.
Yes, he tears into the Duluth model of domestic violence policing.
For listeners who don't know, he argues this model is designed to automatically presume male guilt in any domestic dispute. The book claims that 40 to 70% of domestic violence restraining orders lack any hard, corroborating evidence.
They are used, in his words, as tactical nukes in divorce proceedings.
A woman can make an unsubstantiated claim. The police will automatically remove the man based on the Duluth model. He is immediately evicted from his own home, and she leverages that temporary restraining order into sole custody and a massive financial payout.
The overarching analysis of this entire institutional capture segment is that the legal system has been entirely weaponized against male existence. The author posits that the law now assumes female victimhood and male culpability by default.
It creates a landscape where marriage for a man is no longer a partnership.
No, it is a high-risk contract where he assumes 100% of the liability, while the state guarantees the woman the financial rewards of breaching it, even if she uses fraud or false allegations to do so.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. Because this systemic breakdown, this hostility toward men, doesn't just start when a man gets married and enters family court.
No, it starts way earlier.
The author traces the roots of this ideological capture all the way back to childhood. He describes our modern educational system not as a place of learning, but as execution chambers for boys.
The stories he highlights really underscore his point.
Like little Timmy, an 8-year-old suspended from school because he chewed his Pop-Tart into the shape of a gun. Or another boy suspended for drawing a picture of a toy sword. The author argues that boys are being actively punished simply for possessing normal, natural male energy.
The author makes a highly compelling and disturbing argument regarding the total feminization of education. He claims that modern classrooms, which are overwhelmingly female-dominated environments in terms of teaching staff, actively pathologize natural male behavior.
Because sitting still, quietly, in a desk for 7 straight hours is completely contrary to a young boy's evolutionary biology.
Exactly. When boys naturally fidget, when they display competitiveness, aggression, or physical energy, it is no longer viewed by the system as boyhood. It is diagnosed as a psychiatric disorder. This leads to what the author chillingly terms chemical castration.
Chemical castration via Big Pharma. Let's unpack that, because he ties it directly to the ADHD epidemic.
Exactly. The book details the massive overdiagnosis of boys with ADHD. Instead of accommodating male energy with more recess or hands-on learning, the female-centric educational system medicates it out of existence.
Millions of boys are put on powerful psychostimulants like Ritalin or Adderall to force them into docile, quiet compliance.
The author argues this is a systematic effort to break the male spirit before it can even develop, drugging boys to act more like well-behaved little girls.
And he ties this early pathologization directly to the massive educational gap we are seeing today at the university level. He cites the stark statistic that women now earn roughly 60% of all college degrees, while male dropout rates are skyrocketing across the board.
The book argues that this isn't because girls are inherently smarter.
It's because we are literally medicating, suspending, and alienating boys out of the educational pipeline. We've built an environment completely hostile to how they learn. And when these broken boys grow into broken men, alienated from education and the workforce, what happens? They fall into what the author calls the therapy trap.
Yes, the author elegantly, albeit darkly, synthesizes the failure of our schools with the ideological failure of modern psychology. He points to the harrowing public health statistics that are largely ignored.
The suicide rates.
Men die by suicide 3.5 to 4 times more often than women. The CDC data is unequivocally clear on this epidemic of male despair. But how does the Gynocratic Society respond to this mass dying? The author shares the deeply tragic, infuriating anecdote of Mark.
Mark's story is the emotional core of this section. Walk us through what happened to him.
Mark went through a brutal, life-destroying divorce. He lost his home, his life savings, and most importantly, access to his children through the family court machinery we just discussed. Utterly destroyed, he sought out therapy for his profound grief.
But his therapist, steeped in modern feminist psychology, didn't treat him as a victim of a broken system.
Instead, she labeled his perfectly valid anger, his deep sense of injustice, and his agonizing grief as toxic masculinity. She told him he needed to deconstruct his male privilege and examine how his patriarchal conditioning was the root of his unhappiness.
Mark, completely gaslit by the one person supposed to help him, hanged himself 3 weeks later.
It is devastating. And the author's analysis is that modern therapy has become an ideological weapon designed to gaslight men into submission.
When a man is systematically stripped of his assets, his children, and his dignity by a rigged legal system, and he naturally expresses rage or deep depression, the therapy industry tells him that his suffering is actually a personality disorder.
It shifts the blame entirely onto the victim, telling him that his inherent masculinity is the disease, rather than acknowledging that a hostile gynocratic system is actively destroying him.
That gaslighting, that denial of reality, extends deeply into the biological realm, too. The book tackles what it calls the reproductive double bind and the rise of biological denialism.
Let's look at abortion.
The author breaks down the sheer hypocrisy, from his perspective, of the modern reproductive rights argument. The universal slogan is, "My body, my choice for women." This grants women 100% unilateral authority over the reproductive process. But for men, there's absolutely no my wallet, my choice.
The author analyzes this as a profound, civilization-altering legal and moral asymmetry. Let's examine the logic he presents. If a woman becomes pregnant, she has the absolute legal right to abort the child.
And the book controversially claims that this process targets male fetuses disproportionately, though he focuses mostly on the legal mechanics.
Right. She can abort the child even if the father is on his knees, desperately begging her to keep it, offering to raise it entirely on his own. He has zero legal standing to protect his unborn child.
However, if she chooses to keep the child, even if the man begged her to abort, even if he explicitly stated he was not ready for fatherhood, he is legally forced by the state into 18 years of financial servitude.
It's a system where the woman holds all the power and the man holds all the liability.
Exactly. To rectify this, the author argues strongly for the concept of a paper abortion, citing ongoing philosophical and legal debates in places like Sweden.
The concept is that a man should have a strictly defined legal window, say the first trimester, to sign a document permanently opting out of all financial, legal, and parental responsibility.
Perfectly matching the woman's right to opt out physically.
Without this corresponding right, the author argues, we do not have reproductive equality. We have reproductive tyranny, where male labor is conscripted by female choice.
The book then pivots from reproductive rights to an incredibly critical, unyielding stance on transgender issues, framing it as the ultimate Marxist magic. He points to the highly publicized case of Leah Thomas, a biological male, utterly dominating NCAA women's swimming.
And he pairs it with the massive, sudden, medically inexplicable surge of teenage girls seeking rapid onset gender transitions.
The author doesn't mince words here. He views this entire movement not as a medical advancement, but as a Gnostic heresy. Now, for you listening, that's a dense theological term. How does the author apply ancient Gnosticism to modern gender theory?
It's a brilliant, if controversial, philosophical comparison. Ancient Gnosticism was a religious heresy that believed the physical, material world, including the human body, was an evil, flawed prison created by a lesser god, and that the true, pure spirit was trapped inside.
The goal was to transcend the physical body, to realize your true self.
The author's view is that transgender ideology is simply modern Gnosticism weaponized by Marxism. By claiming that biological sex, the objective reality of X and XY chromosomes in every cell of your body, is merely a social construct that can be altered by internal feelings and cosmetic surgery, society is fundamentally unmooring itself from objective truth.
He's saying it's a war on reality itself.
Yes, he argues it is the final frontier of Marxist deconstruction. If you can force society to deny basic biology, you can force them to accept anything.
He further argues this ideological war is heavily backed by the immense profit motives of Big Pharma,
who have discovered how to monetize the lifetime medicalization of physically healthy children through puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones. And he points to the tragic claim that post-operative suicide rates remain exceptionally high, citing a 41% figure, arguing that mutilating healthy physical bodies does not cure the underlying psychological distress.
It merely masks it while enriching the medical establishment.
That's his perspective, yes.
And while we're looking at alternative family structures and the dismantling of traditional norms, the author pulls out statistical data on lesbian relationships to expose what he sees as the ultimate, undeniable proof of female nature.
He uses this as almost a scientific control group.
He cites studies claiming that lesbian relationships have the highest divorce rates of any demographic, hovering around 72%, and the highest rates of domestic violence, hitting a staggering 44%.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the author uses this specific data set to utterly dismantle the foundational feminist narrative.
The narrative that men are the problem.
The feminist argument has always been that men and the patriarchy are the inherent exclusive source of violence, oppression, and instability in relationships. But the author argues that when you look at lesbian relationships, you have a perfect control group. You have removed men from the equation entirely.
And what happens? The statistics suggest instability and violence actually increase.
His conclusion is profound within his framework. Without a male to absorb the blame or to provide the stoic, grounding frame that diffuses tension, female nature is exposed. The author argues that female-only relationships reveal themselves to be inherently toxic, hyper-emotional, and conflict-driven.
It is a direct data-driven challenge to the utopian feminist idea of a peaceful, harmonious matriarchy.
It absolutely is.
So if the statistics are this bleak, if the system is this rigged, how does this gynocracy maintain its absolute power without triggering a mass revolt of men?
The book claims it relies on two pillars: the media's misandry machine and the economics of lonely, desperate men.
Let's look at the media first. The author outlines the mainstream media as the literal, uncritical propaganda arm of the gynocracy, particularly analyzing the Me Too movement.
He walks through several high-profile cases where the media acted as an executioner before the facts were ever established.
He points to the Duke lacrosse team, whose lives and academic careers were ruined by a false rape accusation that the media ran with blindly for months. He looks at Brian Banks, the high school football star who lost a lucrative NFL future and served actual prison time for a fabricated rape claim.
He brings up Mattress Girl at Columbia University, who gained national fame and awards for dragging a mattress around campus over a completely unsubstantiated accusation.
And of course, the granddaddy of them all, the Amber Heard and Johnny Depp trial, where one of the biggest movie stars on earth had his career instantly vaporized by a single Washington Post op-ed, long before any facts or evidence were presented in a court of law.
The author explains that the media operates on a terrifying belief: all women default. This default functions as a modern digital witch hunt. It completely inverts the foundational Western legal principle of innocent until proven guilty.
With the gynocratic media landscape, a man is guilty the moment the accusation is uttered.
The media prioritizes the destruction of male reputations because it serves as social currency. It signals virtue and loyalty to the feminist Marxist regime. The author argues that this constant stream of destroyed men serves as a psychological deterrent, terrifying the average man into absolute submission.
But the media's fear-mongering is only half of the digital trap. The other half is what the author deeply analyzes as digital castration and the simp economy. And this is where the book gets incredibly critical of men themselves.
He points to platforms like OnlyFans, which he claims funnel over $100 billion a year from lonely, desperate beta males directly into the pockets of women.
Men are literally paying their rent money for pixelated parasocial images, funding the luxurious globe-trotting lifestyles of women who openly despise them. And the kicker: the book argues these women are actually spending that simp money to gain access to top-tier alpha males.
It is the ultimate tragic monetization of male isolation. The author views this simp economy as a form of voluntary serfdom. By participating in this digital cuckoldry, men are actively funding their own oppression.
They are handing over the only leverage they have, their financial resources, without demanding any real-world access, intimacy, or respect in return.
The author argues that this reinforces their invisibility in the actual sexual marketplace. The gynocracy doesn't even have to force them to surrender their wealth. They willingly hand it over for the illusion of female attention.
And it's not just the lonely men paying for OnlyFans who draw the author's ire. He has absolute vitriolic disdain for the manginas and the male feminists, the so-called white knights.
He shares the pathetic story of Kevin, the ultimate male ally.
Kevin did everything right according to the feminist playbook. He marched in the pink pussy hats, he wore the future is female t-shirts, he constantly apologized for his inherent male privilege, and he actively policed other men's behavior.
And what happened to Kevin? The book states his wife divorce raped him, took his house, took his kids, and left him for a traditional, unapologetically masculine man who didn't care about feminism at all.
The evolutionary argument the author deploys here is paramount to understanding his worldview. The author asserts that performative allyship, self-flagellation, and male feminism make men fundamentally, biologically less attracted to women.
It goes back to hypergamy and the shit tests. Because women are biologically wired to seek strength, dominance, leadership, and a strong frame, a man who acts like a subservient, apologizing ally triggers her evolutionary disgust, not her sexual desire.
The white knight is a useful idiot to the political movement. He helps them pass laws and police other men, but he is an evolutionary dead end in the actual mating market.
Women will use his political support, but they will not sleep with him, and they certainly will not respect him.
So what does this all mean? We've spent the last hour laying out this massive interlocking matrix of educational, legal, cultural, and biological traps. Riker paints a picture of a world where the deck isn't just stacked against men, it's actively trying to crush them.
How does a man survive in a gynocracy?
The final section of the book is the author's Brotherhood Blueprint, his manual for escaping the matrix. It is a harsh, uncompromising, and radical call to action. First and foremost, he demands men take the red pill. Wake up to the brutal reality of female hypergamy.
Stop simping. Delete the dating apps that treat you like garbage and redirect every ounce of that wasted energy into focusing entirely on building your own physical strength, your mental resilience, and your financial value.
The author advocates for a life of intense self-reliance, stoicism, and strategic defense. He recognizes that men still have to exist in this system, so he outlines specific legal and medical armor for the modern man.
If you absolutely must interact with the system, if you choose to acquire wealth, he demands you use ironclad prenuptial agreements and complex offshore trusts to protect your assets from the predatory family courts.
But he goes further than just protecting assets. He advocates for total avoidance.
Yes, he heavily promotes the philosophy of MGTOW, men going their own way. He advises men to avoid marriage, avoid cohabitation, and avoid entangling legal relationships with women entirely. By refusing to sign the contract, you eliminate the legal risk of the family court slaughterhouse.
He even goes so far as to forcefully promote vasectomies for young men in their 20s as the ultimate strategic disengagement.
He frames a vasectomy not as a medical procedure, but as an impenetrable shield, a guaranteed way to permanently opt out of the child support, extortion racket, and paternity fraud. It is the ultimate paper abortion executed medically.
He's telling men to put on full tactical armor, but he doesn't just want men to hide in their apartments. He wants them to build entirely parallel economies. The author envisions a mass civilizational exodus of highly competent men retreating from woke, DEI-obsessed corporate jobs and misandrist female-dominated universities.
He wants men to learn hard, undeniable trades: plumbing, welding, electrical engineering, HVAC. Skills that are tethered to physical reality and cannot be canceled by an HR department with a diversity quota.
It's a vision of a shadow civilization. He talks extensively about the financial mechanics of this retreat. He advises men to hide their wealth in decentralized crypto wallets where family court judges cannot track or garnish it.
He envisions underground brotherhoods and localized mastermind groups where men trade physical skills, share legal strategies and custody hacks, and pool their financial resources to create legal defense funds against the inevitable false accusations.
To briefly summarize this sprawling, dense, and frankly overwhelming worldview, Quiet Desperation, under Gynocracy, presents a perspective of total, unavoidable institutional capture. The author believes the social contract between men and women has been irrevocably broken by the alliance of feminism and Marxism.
His final conclusion demands that men who wish to survive must engage in complete strategic disengagement from mainstream society and cultivate absolute, unapologetic self-reliance. It is a philosophy of stark survivalism in a world perceived to be fundamentally hostile to masculinity.
And we must remind you, our listener, once again, we are merely reporting on the architecture of this highly charged ecosystem of ideas. We are exploring the text as it is written, looking at the structural logic the author uses, without endorsing the outcome.
Exactly. It is a text that demands to be understood, if only because it reflects a rapidly growing sentiment among a massive demographic of disaffected men.
We've covered a staggering amount of ground today, and we've gone deep into the mechanics of this philosophy. But before we go, I want to leave you with a final provocative thought to ponder on your own. Something that builds on this source material, but wasn't directly asked in the book. If society continues to fracture exactly as Conrad Riker suggests, with millions of competent men completely opting out of marriage, rejecting higher education, abandoning corporate structures, and retreating to build hidden, parallel brotherhood economies based on untraceable crypto and hard trades, what is the actual civilizational tipping point? Can a modern, technologically advanced civilization survive when its two halves no longer share a common social contract? Or does this ideological divorce inevitably lead to the total catastrophic collapse of the broader community infrastructure? Who keeps the lights on when the men who know how to do it decide this society isn't worth saving? It is a chilling question about the future of our world.
It is indeed a profound question about the structural limits of cultural division and the breaking point of civic duty.
Absolutely. Now, if you want to read the source material directly and see these arguments, the statistics, and the evolutionary claims in their full context, remember to check out Amazon Kindle and Google Play Books right now to buy Quiet Desperation under Gynocracy. It will challenge everything you think you know.
And do not forget to follow the author at Conrad Riker on Substack for his ongoing essays, community discussions, and updates. The text provides a remarkably detailed window into a highly organized, rapidly growing ideological movement. It is essential reading for understanding the modern cultural landscape.
It really is. Thank you so much for joining us on this intense, incredibly deep journey today. Please give this deep dive a like And make sure you subscribe to the show so we can keep bringing you these deep, unfiltered explorations of the most fascinating and provocative texts out there. We will see you next time.